Marcus Chen wiped the grease from his hands with an old rag, the familiar smell of motor oil and hot metal filling the cramped repair bay. His small workshop on the edge of New Angeles wasn't much to look at, sandwiched between a noodle shop and a defunct electronics store. But it kept him busy. The hover cars of 2387 might run on fusion cells and anti-gravity generators, but they still broke down just like the ancient combustion engines his grandfather used to fix. The afternoon sun filtered through the grimy windows, casting long shadows across the concrete floor where Marcus knelt beside a dismantled engine. He'd been working on Mrs. Patterson's family transport for 3 hours, trying to figure out why the stabilization matrix kept failing. The diagnostic computer insisted everything was fine, but Marcus knew better than to trust machines completely. Sometimes you had to get your hands dirty and feel what was wrong. A soft chime from his work terminal indicated another customer had entered the waiting area. Marcus sighed, glancing at the clock. It was nearly closing time, and he'd hoped to finish this repair before tomorrow. He stood up, joints protesting after hours of crouching, and walked toward the front of the shop. The waiting area was small and practical, with a few worn chairs and outdated magazines scattered on a coffee table. What stopped Marcus in his tracks wasn't the furniture, but the figure standing in the center of the room. The being was roughly humanoid, but clearly not human. Its skin had an opalescent quality, shifting between silver and gold as it moved. It stood nearly 8 feet tall, with proportions that seemed slightly off, as if someone had stretched a person vertically. Most striking were its eyes, which held depths that seemed to contain swirling galaxies. The being turned toward Marcus, and when it spoke, its voice resonated with harmonics that made the windows vibrate slightly. "Greetings, Marcus Chen of Earth. I am Zephyros, herald of the cosmic confluence. I have traveled across the void between stars to deliver unto you a message of utmost importance regarding the fate of your species and the future of this galaxy." Marcus blinked, taking in the otherworldly appearance of his visitor. He'd seen plenty of aliens over the years. Earth had been part of the Galactic Union for almost 2 centuries now, and the spaceport brought all kinds of species through New Angeles. But this one was different. There was something about its presence that made the air itself feel charged with energy. "Okay," Marcus said slowly, "but I've got about 20 minutes before I close up shop, and Mrs. Patterson needs her transport back tomorrow morning. Her kid has a soccer game, and she's already rescheduled twice because of this engine problem. So whatever cosmic message you've got, can it wait until I finish this repair?" The silence that followed was profound. Zephyros's expression, which had been one of serene authority, shifted to something resembling confusion. The being's luminous eyes blinked several times, and the harmonics in its voice faltered. What?" Zephyros managed. "Did you not hear what I said? I am a herald of the cosmic confluence. I have journeyed for eons to reach you. The message I bear concerns the very survival of your world." Marcus nodded, wiping his hands again on the rag. "Yeah, I heard you. Herald, cosmic whatever, fate of the galaxy. Sounds pretty important." He gestured toward the chairs. "Look, why don't you have a seat? There's coffee in the machine over there if you want some. I just need to get this stabilization matrix sorted out, and then I can give you my full attention." The divine being stared at Marcus for a long moment, its form seeming to shimmer with barely contained energy. "You would ask a herald of the cosmic confluence to wait?" "Well, yeah," Marcus replied, already turning back toward the repair bay. "I mean, if it's really that important, it'll still be important in 20 minutes, right? And Mrs. Patterson's been without her transport for 3 days now. She's got kids to drop off at school, groceries to pick up, that kind of thing. Real life doesn't stop just because someone shows up claiming to have cosmic messages." As Marcus disappeared into the back of the shop, he called over his shoulder. "Help yourself to the magazines. I think there's a pretty good article about the new Jupiter colonies in last month's issue. Zephyros remained standing in the middle of the waiting area, its luminous form casting strange shadows on the walls. For perhaps the first time in its eternal existence, the Herald found itself genuinely at a loss. In all its travels across the galaxy, through dimensions and across time itself, it had never encountered a response quite like this. The sound of clanking metal and the occasional muttered curse word drifted from the repair bay. Zephyros looked around the simple waiting area, taking in the mundane details. The scuffed linoleum floor, the amateur paintings of Earth landscapes on the walls, the coffee machine that hummed quietly in the corner. It was all so ordinary. After several minutes, curiosity overcame dignity. Zephyros approached the coffee machine, studying the simple interface. The being had observed countless civilizations across the cosmos, but rarely had it taken time to examine the small details of daily life. With careful precision, it pressed the buttons and watched as dark liquid filled a paper cup. The coffee was bitter and harsh, nothing like the refined sustenance Zephyros was accustomed to. Yet there was something oddly satisfying about it, a roughness that spoke of practical necessity rather than aesthetic refinement. The being found itself settling into one of the worn chairs, still somewhat bewildered by the turn of events. From the repair bay came the sound of success, a low hum as the engine fired up properly, followed by Marcus's satisfied exclamation. "There we go. Just needed to realign the quantum flux couplers. They were off by about 3 degrees. Marcus emerged from the back room, wiping his hands once more. His face showed the satisfaction of a job well done, the kind of simple pleasure that came from fixing something that was broken. He found Zephyros sitting in the waiting area, holding a coffee cup with obvious unfamiliarity. "All done," Marcus announced cheerfully. "Mrs. Patterson's transport should run like new now. Sometimes these newer models get a bit too fancy for their own good. All those automated systems can mask simple mechanical problems." He paused, studying the divine being. "So, about this cosmic message. What's the situation?" Zephyros set down the coffee cup and rose to its full, impressive height. The opalescent skin began to glow more brightly, and the air around the being shimmered with energy. "Marcus Chen of Earth, your species stands at a crossroads. The Devourers, ancient entities that consume entire galaxies, have awakened from their eons-long slumber. They move even now toward this region of space, bringing with them the end of all life, all hope, all existence." Marcus listened attentively, nodding occasionally. When Zephyros finished speaking, he was quiet for a moment, processing the information. Okay, that does sound pretty serious. These Devourers. How long before they get here? By our calculations, they will reach the outer systems of this galaxy within 50 of your years, Zephyros replied. The cosmic confluence has been searching throughout the universe for a species capable of standing against them. Your kind, humanity, possesses certain unique qualities that make you ideal candidates for this task. "What kind of qualities?" Marcus asked, settling into the chair across from the Herald. Zephyros seemed to search for the right words. "Your species has an unusual relationship with the impossible. Where others despair in the face of overwhelming odds, humans adapt. Where others seek complex solutions, humans often find simple ones. You possess a pragmatism that borders on the divine, and a stubbornness that defies cosmic law." Marcus chuckled. "Stubbornness, huh? Yeah, I can see that. My wife always says I'm too stubborn for my own good." He leaned back in his chair. "So what exactly are you asking us to do? Fight these Devourers?" The Confluence believes that humanity, given the proper knowledge and resources, could develop weapons and strategies capable of stopping the Devourers. But time is short, and the task will require the cooperation of your entire species. 50 years, Marcus mused. That's not a lot of time to prepare for galaxy-ending monsters. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the busy street beyond. Humans hurried past, going about their daily lives, unaware that a cosmic messenger had just delivered news of potential extinction. You seem remarkably calm about this information, Zephyros observed. Most species react with terror or despair when they learn of the devourers. Marcus turned back to the herald. Well, panicking won't help, will it? If we've got 50 years, then we've got 50 years. That's time to work with. He paused, considering. Who else knows about this? You are the first human I have contacted. The Confluence chose you specifically because of your unique mental patterns. You think in ways that others do not. Lucky me, Marcus said with a slight smile. So I'm supposed to what? Convince the entire human race to gear up for a cosmic war? You are supposed to be the first step, Zephyros replied. The Confluence has observed that humans often respond better to messages that come from their own kind rather than from external sources. You will be given the knowledge necessary to begin preparations, and you will help convince your leaders of the threat's reality. Marcus walked back to his workbench, absently organizing tools while he thought. This is way bigger than fixing hover cars, he said finally. I'm just a mechanic. I fix things that are broken. I'm not sure I'm the right person for saving the galaxy. That is precisely why you are the right person, Zephyros said, its voice carrying new warmth. Your first instinct was not to panic or to assume the situation was hopeless. You asked practical questions. How long do we have? What needs to be done? Who else knows? These are the responses of someone who sees a problem and immediately begins thinking about solutions. Marcus considered this, absently turning a wrench over in his hands. You know what the really weird part is? You showing up here isn't even the strangest thing that's happened to me this week. Monday, I had a Zephyrian trader bring in a transport that was somehow running backwards through time. Took me 6 hours to figure out someone had installed the temporal stabilizers upside down. The herald tilted its head, studying the human with newfound interest. How do you process such anomalies without distress? Same way you process anything else, Marcus replied with a shrug. One step at a time. Figure out what's wrong, figure out how to fix it, then fix it. Whether it's a quantum flux coupler or backwards time travel or galaxy-eating monsters, the approach is pretty much the same. Zephyros found itself genuinely impressed. In its eons of existence, it had delivered cosmic warnings to hundreds of species. Most responded with elaborate ceremonies, desperate prayers, or immediate panic. The idea that someone would treat such news as simply another problem to be solved was entirely novel. The Confluence chose well, Zephyros said quietly. Will you accept this responsibility? Marcus looked around his small shop one more time, taking in the familiar surroundings. Tomorrow, Mrs. Patterson would pick up her transport. The day after, someone else would bring in another broken vehicle. Life would continue, ordinary and practical and real. But underneath it all, there would now be the knowledge that something vast and terrible was moving toward their corner of the universe. Yeah, he said finally. I'll do it. But we're going to do this the human way. What is the human way? Marcus smiled, and for the first time, Zephyros glimpsed something that might have been divine in the simple mechanic's expression. We're going to figure out how these devourers work, and then we're going to fix the problem. Permanently. The herald of the cosmic confluence nodded slowly, beginning to understand why the ancient beings had chosen this particular species. There was something profoundly powerful in such straightforward determination. Outside, the sun was setting over New Angeles, and the first stars were becoming visible in the darkening sky. Somewhere among those stars, ancient horrors stirred in the deep void, beginning their slow journey toward the galaxy. But in a small repair shop on Earth, a human mechanic was already beginning to plan their defeat. It was, Zephyros reflected, perhaps the most human response possible. Faced with the impossible, they simply rolled up their sleeves and got to work. 3 months had passed since Zephyros first appeared in Marcus's repair shop, and the small workspace had transformed into something resembling a cosmic command center. The familiar smell of motor oil now mixed with the ozone scent of advanced alien technology. Holographic displays showed star charts and tactical analyses, while ancient artifacts from the cosmic confluence sat alongside Marcus's everyday tools. The Herald had initially expected to spend a few days transferring knowledge to the human and then depart for other missions. Instead, it found itself fascinated by Marcus's approach to the Devourer problem. Where other species had requested weapons or defensive technologies, Marcus had asked for something entirely different, detailed schematics of how the Devourers actually functioned. Think of them like a really big engine, Marcus was explaining to Dr. Sarah Kim, the xenobiology expert who had become his primary scientific collaborator. Engines need fuel, they have moving parts, and they generate waste products. If we can understand their operational mechanics, we can find ways to disrupt them. Dr. Kim studied the holographic display showing a Devourer's internal structure. The entities were massive, each one roughly the size of a small moon, with crystalline cores that somehow converted matter directly into energy. According to these readings, they're essentially living fusion reactors wrapped in some kind of biometallic shell. Exactly, Marcus said, pointing to a section of the display. See this? This is basically a giant intake manifold. They suck in asteroids, space debris, even small planets, and process it all into fuel. But look at these secondary chambers here. Zephyros watched from the corner, still amazed by the human's mechanical perspective on cosmic horrors. Those secondary chambers are believed to house their consciousness matrices, the Herald interjected. The source of their malevolent intelligence. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. Right. But they're also structural weak points. Any engineer will tell you that the more complex you make a system, the more potential failure points you create. He turned to Dr. Kim. What do you think would happen if we could introduce some kind of disruptive element into those chambers? Theoretically, if we could somehow interrupt their neural pathways, it might cause a system-wide cascade failure, Dr. Kim replied. But getting close enough to a Devourer to attempt such a thing would be suicide. They're surrounded by defensive fields that can tear apart entire battle fleets. Not necessarily, Marcus said with a grin that Zephyros had learned to recognize as dangerous. What if we didn't try to fight our way through their defenses? What if we made them come to us? Over the following weeks, Marcus's plan began to take shape. It was audacious in its simplicity and terrifying in its implications. Rather than attempting to destroy the Devourers through brute force, he proposed turning their own feeding mechanism against them. It's like setting up a really big trap, Marcus explained to the assembled representatives from the Galactic Union. The conference room aboard the orbital station held delegates from dozens of species, all struggling to comprehend the humans' proposal. Admiral Thornfield, representing the human space navy, leaned forward in his chair. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, Chen. You want to construct artificial asteroids loaded with nanoscale disruptors, then use them as bait to lure the Devourers into range? That's the basic idea, Marcus confirmed. The Devourers feed indiscriminately. They see a cluster of asteroids, they're going to try to consume them. But these asteroids will be hollow shells filled with billions of specialized nanobots. Once the nanobots are inside the Devourer systems, they'll target those neural consciousness chambers Dr. Kim identified. Ambassador Veltar, a crystalline being from the Andorian collective, resonated with skeptical harmonics. This plan assumes the Devourers will not detect the deception. Their sensors are far more sophisticated than anything in our databases. Actually, that's where the beauty of the plan comes in, Dr. Kim interjected, activating a new holographic display. The nanobots won't register as artificial to the Devourer's sensors because they're not entirely artificial. We've based their design on a symbiotic microorganism found in Earth's deep ocean trenches. Zephyros stepped forward, its opalescent form shimmering with approval. The Confluence has analyzed this approach. It is unprecedented in its creativity. No species has ever attempted to weaponize the Devourer's feeding process. General Morrison from Earth's Defense Command raised a skeptical eyebrow. And if this doesn't work? If the Devourers detect the trap, or if the nanobots don't function as expected? Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering the question seriously. Then we fall back to Plan B, he said finally. Which is? We get really creative with Plan C, Marcus replied with characteristic deadpan delivery. Despite the gravity of the situation, several delegates actually chuckled. There was something reassuring about the humans' unflappable confidence, even in the face of cosmic annihilation. The construction phase proved to be its own challenge. Creating artificial asteroids that could fool the Devourer's sensors required unprecedented cooperation between dozens of species. The Rigelian engineers provided the structural frameworks, while the Centauri colonies contributed their expertise in nano-manufacturing. Earth's contribution was something entirely unexpected: creativity. The problem with most galactic engineering projects, Marcus observed to his expanded team, is that everyone overthinks them. They build in redundancies and fail-safes and backup systems until the whole thing becomes so complex that it's more likely to break down than to function. This philosophy drove him to insist on what he called elegant simplicity in the asteroid design. Each artificial asteroid contained only 3 components: a shell that mimicked natural rock composition, a hollow interior filled with nanobots, and a simple trigger mechanism that would release the nanobots once the asteroid was consumed. No communication systems, no remote controls, no fancy guidance systems, Marcus explained to the engineering teams. The simpler we keep it, the less there is to go wrong. Dr. Kim had spent months perfecting the nanobots themselves. Based on Earth's extremophile bacteria, they were designed to survive the harsh conditions inside a Devourer's processing chambers and then navigate to the neural consciousness centers. Once there, they would simply exist, producing a specific electromagnetic frequency that would disrupt the Devourer's thought processes. It's not designed to kill them immediately, she explained to Zephyros during one of their late-night research sessions. Instead, it should cause progressive degradation of their higher cognitive functions. They'll essentially become mindless eating machines. And then? The Herald asked. Marcus looked up from his workbench, where he was assembling the trigger mechanisms by hand. Then they'll keep eating until there's nothing left to eat, including each other. Problem solved. Zephyros found this approach both elegant and slightly disturbing. The cosmic confluence had always approached the Devourer threat through direct confrontation, gathering massive fleets and powerful weapons for decisive battles. The idea of turning the creatures against themselves through such subtle manipulation had never occurred to the ancient beings. As the construction phase neared completion, word began to spread throughout the galaxy about humanity's plan. Reactions were mixed. Some species hailed it as genius, while others worried about the ethical implications of biological warfare on a cosmic scale. They're not technically alive in any way we understand, Marcus argued during one heated debate with the Galactic Ethics Committee. They're more like really advanced machines that happen to be made of biological materials, and they want to eat everything in the galaxy, including us. I don't see this as an ethical dilemma. I see it as pest control. The final preparations took place in the Titan shipyards, where hundreds of artificial asteroids were loaded onto specially modified cargo vessels. Each ship would deploy its payload at carefully calculated coordinates, creating a network of bait across multiple star systems. The timing would be crucial. The asteroids needed to be in position before the Devourers arrived, but not so early that they might be detected by advanced scouts. On the eve of deployment, Marcus stood in the observation deck overlooking the shipyard, watching as the last of the cargo vessels were loaded. Zephyros joined him, its luminous form casting strange shadows in the dim lighting. "You realize," the herald said quietly, "that if this plan fails, there will be no second chance. The Devourers will be upon us, and they will be aware of our capabilities." Marcus nodded, hands clasped behind his back. "I know, but you know what I've learned in my years of fixing things. The most catastrophic failures usually come from overthinking the problem. Sometimes the simple solution is the right solution. And if you are wrong?" Marcus turned to look at the cosmic being, his expression serious but untroubled. "Then we'll figure out something else. That's what humans do. We adapt, we improvise, we keep trying until we find what works." He paused, looking back out at the ships. "Besides, you said it yourself. We're stubborn to the point of defying cosmic law. I don't think the universe is ready to get rid of us just yet." Zephyros considered this, realizing that it had come to understand something fundamental about humanity during these months of preparation. It wasn't just their problem-solving abilities or their technological adaptability that made them special. It was their absolute refusal to accept defeat, even in the face of impossible odds. The deployment began the next day. Ships scattered across multiple star systems, each following carefully plotted courses to avoid detection. The artificial asteroids were released in clusters, positioned to look like natural debris fields that the Devourers would find irresistible. Then came the waiting. Long-range sensors tracked the approaching Devourers, still months away, but moving steadily toward the inner galaxy. Communication networks buzzed with updates and speculation. Some species evacuated their outer colonies, while others reinforced their defenses, but most simply waited, trusting in the ingenuity of a single human mechanic who had looked at cosmic horrors and seen nothing more than an engineering problem to be solved. Marcus returned to his shop during this period, much to everyone's surprise. While scientists and military leaders monitored the approaching threat, he went back to fixing hover cars and everyday problems. "Don't you want to oversee the operation?" Dr. Kim asked during one of her visits. Marcus shrugged, elbow deep in an engine compartment. "The plan's in motion. Either it works or it doesn't. Me standing around in a command center isn't going to change anything." He emerged from the engine, wiping his hands on a familiar rag. "Besides, Mrs. Patterson's transport is making that noise again. Some things are more important than saving the galaxy." Dr. Kim stared at him for a moment, then started laughing. "You know what? You're absolutely right." Outside the shop, the stars continued their ancient dance, unaware that the fate of countless civilizations might soon be decided by a collection of artificial rocks and microscopic organisms designed in a simple repair bay by a man who treated cosmic crises like automotive problems. The Devourers were coming, but humanity was ready, and for the first time in its existence, Zephyros found itself genuinely optimistic about the outcome of a cosmic conflict. The first reports came in exactly 18 months after the asteroid deployment. Long-range sensors in the Proxima system detected massive energy signatures moving through the outer asteroid belt. The Devourers had arrived right on schedule, and they were doing exactly what Marcus had predicted they would do: feeding. In the command center aboard the orbital defense platform, dozens of screens showed real-time data from across the galaxy. Admiral Thornfield stood at the central console, surrounded by representatives from every major species. The tension in the room was palpable as they watched the feeds from the outer systems. "Devourer Alpha is engaging the first asteroid cluster," reported Lieutenant Chen. No relation to Marcus despite the shared surname. "Energy signatures indicate active consumption in progress." Dr. Kim monitored the biological sensors, watching for any sign that the nanobots were functioning as designed. Neural disruption nanobots are registering as active. Initial deployment appears successful. How long before we know if it's working? Admiral Thornfield asked. According to Marcus's calculations, we should see behavioral changes within 6 to 8 hours, Dr. Kim replied. The nanobots need time to navigate to the neural centers and establish a stable disruption pattern. Marcus himself was notably absent from the command center. When Admiral Thornfield had called to inform him that the plan was in motion, the mechanic had simply said, "Good, let me know how it turns out," and hung up. A follow-up call revealed that he was helping his neighbor install a new water heater. "That's the most human thing I've ever heard," Zephyros had commented when it learned of Marcus's response. The Herald stood in the corner of the command center, its luminous form dimmed with concentration as it monitored cosmic energy patterns that the mechanical sensors couldn't detect. Hours passed with agonizing slowness. The Devourers continued their methodical consumption of the asteroid fields, each one taking in massive quantities of material. To the watching observers, everything appeared to be proceeding normally. The cosmic horrors showed no signs of distress or altered behavior. "Maybe the nanobots weren't as resistant as we thought," suggested General Morrison. "The conditions inside those things are pretty extreme." "The nanobots are still active," Dr. Kim insisted, checking her readings again. "I'm detecting their electromagnetic signatures throughout the Devourers' systems. They're doing what they're supposed to do." "Then why aren't we seeing any effects?" The answer came suddenly and dramatically. Devourer Alpha, the massive entity that had been methodically working its way through the first asteroid cluster, abruptly stopped moving. For several minutes, it simply hung motionless in space, its energy patterns fluctuating wildly. "What's happening?" Admiral Thornfield demanded. Before anyone could respond, Devourer Alpha resumed movement, but its behavior was completely different. Instead of the precise, calculated feeding patterns it had exhibited before, the creature began consuming asteroids randomly, seemingly without any strategic purpose. "It's lost higher cognitive function," Dr. Kim breathed, staring at her readings. "The neural disruption is working. It's operating on pure instinct now." On the screens, they watched as Devourer Alpha encountered Devourer Beta, another of the massive entities. Under normal circumstances, the creatures coordinated their feeding to avoid conflict. But Alpha, its consciousness compromised, immediately attacked its companion. The battle was titanic. Energy discharges that could have vaporized entire moons flashed between the two creatures as they grappled in the void. But it quickly became apparent that Beta was also showing signs of neural disruption. Its defensive responses were sluggish, uncoordinated. "They're both infected," Zephyros observed, its voice filled with something approaching awe. "The nanobots must have spread when Alpha attempted to consume Beta." Across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out as more Devourers encountered the trapped asteroids. Each creature that fed on the nanobots became a carrier, spreading the neural disruption to others through direct contact or shared feeding grounds. Within days, reports were coming in from multiple systems of Devourers attacking each other or exhibiting erratic behavior. "It's like a cosmic plague," Dr. Kim said during one of the daily briefings. "But instead of killing them outright, it's removing their intelligence and coordination. They're reverting to pure predatory instinct." The results were better than anyone had dared hope. The Devourers, stripped of their higher cognitive functions, began turning on each other with savage efficiency. Creatures that had once worked together to consume entire star systems now fought viciously over individual asteroids. Their coordinated advance toward the galactic core dissolved into chaos. Marcus finally appeared at the command center a week into the operation, arriving with a toolbox and wearing his usual work clothes. "Heard you folks were having some technical difficulties with the long-range sensors," he said matter-of-factly. Figured I'd take a look. Admiral Thornfield stared at him in disbelief. Chen, your plan is working beyond our wildest expectations. The Devourers are destroying themselves. Don't you want to see what's happening? Marcus shrugged, already examining the sensor array. I can see the status reports. Looks like everything's working as intended. He paused, studying a loose connection. Besides, these sensors are more important right now. If they fail, we won't be able to monitor the situation properly. It was such a perfectly practical response that several people in the command center started laughing. Here was a man who had potentially saved the galaxy, and his first concern was making sure the equipment was functioning correctly. As weeks turned to months, the true scope of the nanobot's effect became clear. The Devourer swarm, once an unstoppable tide of destruction, had effectively ceased to exist as an organized threat. Individual creatures still wandered through space, consuming whatever they encountered, but they were no longer capable of the coordinated campaigns that had destroyed previous galaxies. More importantly, they were consuming each other. The largest and most dangerous Devourers were being eliminated by their own kind, as the neural disruption drove them into increasingly aggressive behavior. It was biological warfare on a cosmic scale, using the creature's own nature against them. The cosmic confluence is impressed, Zephyros admitted during a private conversation with Marcus in the repair shop. The Herald had taken to visiting regularly, finding something oddly comforting about the mundane environment. In all our eons of existence, we have never witnessed such an elegant solution to an impossible problem. Marcus looked up from the hovercar engine he was working on, Mrs. Patterson's transport yet again. It wasn't really that elegant, he said. I just looked at what they were designed to do and figured out how to make them do it wrong. You speak as if it were simple. Most good solutions are simple, Marcus replied. The hard part is usually getting people to accept them. Everyone wants to overthink things, make them more complicated than they need to be. Zephyros considered this, watching as Marcus made precise adjustments to the engine components. There was something almost meditative about the human's work, a focused attention to detail that transformed mechanical repair into an art form. What will you do now? The Herald asked. You have saved not just your own species, but countless civilizations across the galaxy. Surely such an achievement deserves recognition, reward. Marcus chuckled, wiping his hands on the ever-present rag. I think I'll keep fixing things. It's what I'm good at, and people always need things fixed. He gestured around the shop. This place suits me. Besides, someone's got to keep Mrs. Patterson's transport running. As if summoned by the mention of her name, Mrs. Patterson herself appeared in the doorway, her weathered face showing the kind of gratitude that came from dealing with a trustworthy mechanic. Marcus, you're a lifesaver, she said, pulling out her payment card. This thing's been running like a dream since your last repair. My grandson says it's smoother than his father's brand new transport. Just doing my job, Mrs. Patterson, Marcus replied, accepting the payment. Same time next month for the regular maintenance? Wouldn't trust anyone else with it, she said, climbing into the driver's seat. You take care now. After she left, Zephyros shook its luminous head in amazement. You saved the galaxy, and she thanks you for fixing her transport. Both are important, Marcus said simply. The galaxy saving was a one-time thing. But Mrs. Patterson needs to get to her grandson's soccer games every week. That's ongoing maintenance. In the months that followed, reports continued to arrive from across the galaxy. The Devourer threat was effectively neutralized, with the surviving creatures too scattered and mentally compromised to pose any significant danger. Several species began establishing new colonies in systems that had been considered too dangerous to inhabit. The Galactic Union formally recognized Marcus's contribution to cosmic security, offering him titles, rewards, and positions of authority that would have made him one of the most powerful beings in known space. He politely declined them all, explaining that he already had a job he liked. The scientific community was less easily satisfied. Researchers from dozens of species descended on Earth, eager to study the human approach to problem-solving. Universities offered Marcus teaching positions, while corporations tried to hire him for astronomical sums. "They don't get it," Marcus explained to Dr. Kim during one of her visits. "They want to turn this into some kind of universal methodology, a formula they can apply to other problems. But that's not how it works. Every problem is different. You have to look at each one individually and figure out what's actually broken." Dr. Kim had become something of a celebrity herself, her research into the nanobots leading to breakthroughs in several fields. But she still made time to visit Marcus's shop, finding their conversations more valuable than any academic conference. "The other species are starting to change their approach to problem-solving," she told him. "The Rigelians have simplified their engineering protocols. The Centauri are focusing more on practical solutions rather than theoretical perfection. You've influenced how an entire galaxy thinks about challenges." "As long as they remember that simple doesn't mean easy," Marcus replied. "Simple solutions still require hard work to implement properly." Zephyros had become a permanent fixture at the shop, much to the Herald's own surprise. The Cosmic Confluence had originally recalled it for other assignments, but Zephyros had requested an extended observation period to study human problem-solving methods. In reality, it simply found Marcus's company oddly comforting. "I believe I understand now why the Confluence chose your species," Zephyros said one evening as Marcus closed up the shop. "It is not just your adaptability or your stubbornness. It is your perspective. You see the universe as a collection of systems that can be understood and repaired, rather than as a series of insurmountable obstacles." Marcus locked the front door and turned to face the Herald. "Everything breaks down eventually," he said. "Engines, relationships, civilizations, apparently even cosmic horrors. But most things can be fixed if you take the time to understand how they work and what's gone wrong with them." "And if they cannot be fixed?" Marcus smiled, the expression visible in the glow from Zephyros's luminous form. "Then you figure out how to build something better." As they walked together through the quiet streets of New Angeles, the stars overhead seemed brighter than usual. Somewhere among those distant points of light, the remnants of the Devourer swarm wandered aimlessly through space, their threat neutralized by microscopic organisms designed in a small repair shop by a man who refused to be impressed by the impossible. The galaxy was safe, not through the application of overwhelming force or ancient wisdom, but through the simple human conviction that every problem had a solution if you were willing to work for it. And in his modest shop on Earth, Marcus Chen continued to fix things, one hovercar at a time, proving every day that the most extraordinary solutions often came from the most ordinary places. The divine being had shown up with a cosmic crisis, and the person had indeed told it to wait. But in doing so, Marcus had demonstrated something that even the Cosmic Confluence was only beginning to understand. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is finish the job you've already started before taking on the next one. The universe, after all, would always need fixing, and there would always be humans ready to roll up their sleeves and get to work.